Hello again, Salem. This is Bill from Salem Digest coming to you from the studios at Salem Access Television. And we are continuing with our candidate interview series for the September 14th, 2021 preliminary election. I had to draw that out this time. I've been saying it too fast, and it comes out crooked every time. So right now we have Ward 1 incumbent Robert J. Bob McCarthy. And Bob, welcome to SATV. Thanks for coming by.
Bill, thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. We're going to jump right into the questions. No warm-up. You didn't get a chance to limber up. You're just going to have to jump through the hoops now.
Fire away.
So, you've been on the council for a period of time. You're not new to this rodeo. I want to ask this question in two parts. I only presented it in one part.
Okay.
First off, what initially motivated you to run the very first time that you ran? And second, what motivates you now? Why are you doing this again?
This is my ninth election?
I think it's your ninth.
Ninth. The first time I ran against then Lucy Cacciato was the incumbent. I ran in, I didn't prevail, and it was one of those things I decided to run because Lucy at the time was just a freshman councillor. And I was a little naive back then. Didn't really understand what it takes to be a counselor. I think that Lucy, after the election I had against her, she really gained her voice. And I think that you realize once you put your name on the ballot and you get elected, you think about people who sit there and you say, well, they're not doing anything. Well, they're trying to navigate the system. It's not being a counselor it doesn't come with like a complete set of guide rules or. You
got the book for the council procedures, and everything else is by the seat of your pants.
They say let you go, and I think I didn't understand that at first, and I thought Lucy just got elected. She was a freshman counselor. I thought it was an opportunity for me because I moved to Salem. I got married. I had a couple kids. We still live here. My kids went to the school system here. My kids were afforded every opportunity through everything that Salem has to offer, whether it be from Cartoon League basketball to soccer, Little League, you name it. And and along the way, I was always willing to help out and coach or assistant coach. And I just Salem became a place that I really fell in love with. And my wife grew up here. We met, at the House of Seven Gables. That's where she worked. I was doing my father used to do the contract maintenance there. And we met and we started dating. We fell in love and we decided to stay here. And for all those experiences I had when I was younger with, my kids, I felt I wanted to contribute and give something back. And it was one of those things when I look back at it, you asked the question for me to look back. When I look back is, I was always one that was always into a volunteer mode, was always looking to help out, contribute. And I thought that this was just a great opportunity. It didn't work out the first time I ran. It didn't deter me. I stayed involved. I was always one of those back in the day, before Zoom and all this stuff was back in the day. I used to be the guy that would come into the council meetings and sit in the corner. Back then we didn't have a public comment period.
Right.
So I would just sit and watch and learn. And I can honestly say that, the Lucy the next year or 2 years later decided not to run. And I looked at it, I had no real plans on running because, but where Lucy had decided not to run, then I took that opportunity to run and actually ran against Mickey Northcutt.
I recall that.
Yeah. So and it's funny because now that you fast forward 16 years later, Lucy is the president of the Point Neighborhood Association. She and I become friends. I mean, I've ever since they formed the Point Neighborhood Association, I try to go to all their monthly meetings, and now Mickey runs the CDC, which the North Shore CDC, which runs the has a lot of the housing in the Point. So we've all become very friendly, which is, I think that speaks to, the council I've tried to become. Is like I'm always of the opinion, and you sat in the room with me for 3 years. You leave it at the door. What the arguments, the debate happens in the room.
That's the way it's supposed to happen.
That's the way it's supposed to happen. It doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way, and I think a lot of that today has to do with social media. Social media is just a fact of life today. But you know, you have to realize that, you know, people use social media as a way to get information out there and also to get their opinions out there and also to get their complaints out there. So as a counselor, I've kind of tried to stay out of the fray of social media. Some of my colleagues, past and present, like to get into the fray. I'm not one of those persons. I'll see an issue coming on social media. I'll look at it and I'll address it. I'll say, you know, I forwarded that to so and so, and I'll leave it at that. I'm not, you know, the way I look at social media, I use it as a way to get information out there. People want to get confrontational with me, want to ask me a question. They can find me on my porch. They can knock on my door. They can give me a call. I try to deal with them that way. I mean, social media, it is what it is. I look at it as a way to bring information out, and they can get information to me. But as I always tell people after the fact, if you're spending the time to, you know, post something on social media, hoping that someone's going to see it, if you first took the time and like called the police department or sent me an email, I don't. You know, both our phones are sitting here in front of us. Yours is kind of dinging right now.
It's vibrating.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. But if I'm at work, I mean, I have a day job. If I'm at work and I don't see a post, that's something but, you know, because it's not like Facebook alerts me when people are, you know, tagging me on Facebook. It does, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't, I don't have it set up so it goes ding and stuff like that. I don't have that time during the day sometimes.
It'll be dinging all day.
Yeah.
Dinging all day.
So sometimes it's easier when the emails I get quicker, because, you know, I get work emails too. So, but all that being said, I mean, today it's like, I will say, I'm not going to lie to you. Every year is an evaluation. I should say every 2 years, because as, you know, I got married, a couple of kids. When I first got into it, my kids were, you know, we were younger, and now they're both, you know, college graduates, you know, graduates of Salem High School, went on to UMass Amherst, both got degrees. They're both working now, which is great. But every 2 years is an evaluation. I have to kind of sit down with my wife, and I'm not going to lie to you. After this pandemic, I mean, my youngest son has an underlying health condition. My wife has got some, you know, has got an issue with, you know, immune. So it's, you know, we were very cautious this past year and a half. You know, we're becoming more cautious now. Again, you know, with the resurgence. But it's one of those things that I'm not complaining, but it took a lot out of me this past year with, you know, both at work, my own personal work, at home, and on the council. I mean, you saw what happened. I mean, we had to pivot in March, and I was, you know, with Patrick and myself and the city clerk and a bunch of us up in the council chambers trying to figure out Zoom. I had no idea.
No template.
Nope. We didn't know what, I mean, at that point, I mean, I'm a contractor. I didn't know what Zoom was. And we had to pivot right in March and come up with a plan to try to make it so government still worked for the people. And I think that after a year of that, it was challenging, exciting, and exhausting all at the same time. And you know, after I finished that year, I'm really impressed with what the Ward 2 Councilor, Christine Medore, is doing as council president this year. And you know, she's taking what we laid out last year with Zoom and really making it so people. I mean, when you look at the numbers from when you look at the, you know, Zoom has the ability to track who comes into meetings, you know, how, you know, when they're there, what they're doing, and the amount of engagement and the people who are attending meetings. I'm not saying that they didn't used to watch SATV.
This is a different story, though.
Yeah.
It's actually better. It should remain. I know we're working on it. The city's working on it.
Yeah.
It brings more people to engage with city government.
It makes the people I've heard from is, you know, we spent the time last year and this year, and we've only had one, you know, after March when we, you know, had to go into the Zoom realm of things. We've only had one meeting back in council chambers. I mean,
I was there.
I miss it. You know, you were there. I miss council chambers. It's one of those things where you get, you know, it's, you know, back in the day, you'd be in the ante room. There would be, you know, a subcommittee meeting going on. You could sit there, catch up, you know, how's your wife, how's the kids, you know, what did you think about this? You miss that because on Zoom you kind of just log in at 2 minutes before the meeting starts. You pop in and you're there.
I enjoyed going to that meting. Yep. But you know what I enjoyed more?
What's that?
Being able to get up when I felt like I'd had enough and leaving, which you can't do.
Nope, I can't. It's been Serving the city and representing Ward 1 has been one of the biggest honors of my life. And I tell people all the time, I serve at the will of the people. And when people look at me and they say, well, you've been doing it 14 years, isn't it enough? I says, you know what? For me this year was, like I said, it was a long debate with my wife. And it was in the family. I want to make sure everyone was on board. But for me, it was like, you know what? Salem is, you know, in retrospect, when I look back, you know, when I first started, Mayor Driscoll had just been in for 2 years. She'd come off of inheriting some stuff, and I'm not bashing anybody. It was just the way government was working back in the day. She came in with the help of the council, and we kind of revamped the structure of the way city government was set up, and then we brought back. I mean, you know, back when I first started, there was 78 firefighters. I mean, the answer was, you know, to balance the budget was through attrition, not to fill spots, and so we made a commitment to, you know, bring back the firefighters. Most recently the Parks Initiative, the Signature Parks Initiatives, and those are things that, you know, when I look back where we were and where we are, we need to keep that momentum going, in my opinion. And I felt like, and it's no disrespect to anybody I sit in the council chambers with, but right now, with the way the elections are shaking out, and with people deciding not to run, and we're talking some, you know, incumbents not run. It leaves me as the old guy in the room, and I don't like to use that because I don't feel myself as old, but I'm the most experienced guy. And for me, it's like, on top of wanting to serve, and that's paramount for me. I serve at the will of the Ward 1 voters. If the Ward 1 voters decide that I'm not the right guy, so be it. But in the same, so I also represent the city council. And as a city council member, I really feel that I owe it to the council as well to make sure that, you know, we don't leave a void at the top, because, you know, Councilor Sargent decided not to run, Councilor Turiel decided not to run.
You lost Councilor Fury the last cycle.
We lost Councilor Fury last cycle. So when I look at it is, that leaves me in the elder statesman spot so much right now. I mean, if I get reelected, and I'm not saying it's not, you know, I take it very seriously. You know, anyone has the right to run. I give my two opponents all the credit in the world for wanting to put their names on the ballot. But for me personally, this is like, I think that I think I've done the job. I think that if anyone who's, you know, over the last 14 years wants to take a hard look and they want to fault me for something I've done, please, if that's what then fault me. But I want to keep the momentum going, and I really think that on top of that, I think part of when you say what motivates me now is all of that. But at the same time is I don't want to leave a void in the council, because I really believe that the institution of the city council is paramount. And sometimes you need that. I want to pass that perspective off to someone who's moving up the ranks. But there's been a bunch of councilors that have elected not to run. I don't fault them for that. And then in the last election cycle, we had a big turnover. So I really feel that, you know, we need someone to, you know, maintain that at least for another 2 years. That's all I'm hoping. That's all I'm hoping for right now. That's all I'm asking for is, you know, another 2 years to represent Ward 1.
All right, let's move on to question 2, Bob. Ward 1, very, very diverse ward. Demographics-wise, you know, population-wise, very, very diverse population. Also diverse housing-wise and business-wise. You got some small businesses, you got a huge business at one end of the ward, another huge business at the other end of the ward. You've also got a mixture of housing, very dense, multi-family housing over here, smaller but still fairly dense multi-family housing on Derby Street. Then you go up into the Willows where it's mostly single-family housing. Do you look at each of these 3 neighborhoods within the ward as separate and distinct from each other, or and do you think that they each have their own unique problems which have to be dealt with separately?
I mean, obviously, just as the way you just described it, each section of the ward, when people talk to me about Ward 1, you got it's the Point neighborhood, it's the Derby Street neighborhood, it's the Willows. I mean, obviously, they're 3 distinct areas geographically, but they, we all hold similar issues. I mean, everyone, housing has become the hot button topic, and it's just not in Salem. It's North Shore. It's the whole Boston metro. The curveball recently in the Point neighborhood was when Shetland, who was the Lappin family owned it forever. The new guys come in, try to engage them in a conversation. Nope, we're just focused on what we do, blah blah blah, and all of a sudden they were coming to some Point neighborhood meetings. I was there. That was, you know, they were trying to figure out how to mix their property into the Point neighborhood, and, you know, how, you know, what the Point neighborhood was looking for. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, they file that, you know, they make their state filing, and then they're asking for the units they were asking for. And it threw all for a loop. And since then, they've retracted it.
Well, that was apparently a mistake of some kind.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
Fair enough.
I'll try to give them the benefit of the doubt. But, you know, that was when that announcement came out. That was one of those. Pick up the phone. I'm on the phone with the administration going, what's going on?
It's like throwing a rock through a window.
Yep. And so they've since retracted. They've reached out to me. They want to have, you know, they want to have that discussion. I think they asked, like most people, they asked for the moon, realizing that, you know, the process they were going to go through the state was going to be a 1.5 to 2 year process. So they asked for the moon, knowing that they probably weren't going to get the moon, but they wanted to be able to start, you know, jumpstart the process. Well, didn't really work well. It was a lot of backlash.
Immediate backlash.
Always immediate. It was within 24 hours, 48 hours. I think they retracted it. So I mean, when you look at the Point neighborhood, you know, you want to find something that's going to mix in there, that's going to, you know, complement the neighborhood and still provide, you know, because back in the day, I don't know if you were on the council then when we passed the overlay district for Shetland. Shetland asked for an overlay district. They wanted to become more competitive. They compared themselves to.
I think that was after me.
Was it after you? Okay.
I think.
They wanted to be more competitive to, like.
Cumming Center.
Right. And so they asked for it to try to create the overlay district so they could attract the same kind of businesses. I mean, obviously, it's a big commercial base. We'd like to maintain that, but how are they going to supplement that? Potentially, that's for discussion. I'm never adverse to having a discussion. It's easy to say. It's easy to, you know, stomp your feet and start saying no, 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 but you don't even know what they're asking for. You're just hearing a potential, well, they could be asking for this, or they could be doing. If you don't know, you know, what the full scope is of what they're asking, it's always beneficial to listen. And you're always going to be and if you have, and people always say, you know, sometimes they, you know, I hear the critiques. You know, Bob goes to meetings and he sits in the back of the room and doesn't say much.
That's what you should be doing, because you're there to listen to the neighbors.
Exactly. That's the way I view my job. I mean, that's the way I've always presented myself. I'm the guy who sits in the back. I'm usually, if, you know, back in the day, I was scribbling little notes on whatever I had. Now I just take out people are always on his phone. No, I'm not on my phone. I'm writing myself a note on my phone to, you know, so-and-so complained about XYZ, whatever it is. You know, it's one of those things. On my way home, I'll write an email or something, or I'll make a phone call the next morning. I'll take care of something. But, you know, going back to the question is, but then you look at the Point, you know, very diverse neighborhood, very densely populated. We're doing everything we can over the course of, like, my tenure is, you know, revamping Mary Jane Lee Park. Currently, we're redoing Palmer Cove, making that more, you know, family friendly, as opposed to, you know, making it, you know, to cover all aspects of multi-generational uses. You know, we added the park at 15 Peabody Street back in the day. The Harbor Walk, just trying to tie everything in together. When you look at Derby Street, I mean, back in the day, there was no Blaney Street, there was no ferry, there was, you know, no commercial pier. So, you know, we try to supplement the neighborhood with some of the, you know, the maritime, but also being respectful, because, you know, you alluded to it. I mean, when you look at the Derby Street neighborhood, you look at a lot of 3-family homes, multi-generational. You know, back in the day, there'd be, you know, uncles, cousins, whoever live in the same house. They probably, you know, back in the day, my mother didn't work. I mean, I don't know if your mother, you know, worked, but back in the day, my mother, until my youngest brother turned, I think he was in middle school, is when my mother went to work. When you know, the kids were out of the house, and, you know, I think that's when we all had to get a key to the front door, because there was never a key to the house, because the house was always open, because my mother was always home. You know, when we came home from school, I was very fortunate. That's the way I was, you know. But, you know, when you look at the multi-generational homes down, like on the Derby Street neighborhood, you're coming, you know, a lot of condo conversions. So now you're not seeing, you know, multi-generationals that could be sharing one car. Now everyone's a car becomes, you know, congestion becomes an issue. How we supplement the parking, like at the Blaney Street lot in the non-summer years, because, you know, the Blaney Street lot, you know, we're there to help the ferry, we're there to help the commercial businesses, but at the same time, we want to make that parking lot an asset to the neighborhood. And, you know, I know one of your, I saw that you were kind enough to send the questions. I won't touch the power plant because I know that's the.
Well, you can go where you want.
No, that's fine. But we're looking at the 40 acres at the power plant and how that's going to supplement the neighborhood. But then you look at the Willows. You alluded to it. It's a lot of single family homes, but at the same time as the issue we're facing, some of the issues in the Willows is I look at the mansionization issue. People want to buy a house, they want to tear it down, they want to put up a bigger house on where you got a lot of smaller homes, and you look at that, but also you look at we're close to the coast. The whole issue of floodplains and building in floodplains and how someone explained to me, you build your way out of it, you wall your way out of it, or you pump your way out of it. When you look at it as right now we've been dealing with the neighbors. The neighbors formed a group. They call themselves the Wall Committee, and we're going to redo the seawall down along Columbus. It's called the Steps Beach, and that's been a big undertaking. It's been a lot of meetings. I give the neighbors down there all the credit in the world. They started the process. They engaged the city, myself. They engaged Senator Lovely's office, Representative Tucker's office, the mayor's office. We've had meetings in people's, back before the pandemic, in people's homes, and meetings with Dave Knowlton, and so we're trying to deal with that, and we just got approval from the state for about almost $1 million. We're in the permitting process for that. But when you look at the Willows as well, you also look at with the Signature Parks initiatives, the Park and Rec Commission wants to, with the big money we're spending over at Forest River for the pool. I mean, that was, some people want to criticize us for voting for a pool. My response to them is, we've had a pool. We're going to maintain a pool for our most vulnerable population, the kids who can't afford a pool, who need a place to go. The Y is moving up there to run their programs to once again help the kids in the summertime. And most recently the Y was at Camp Numkeg. So they're looking at the swap of taking, Pioneer Village and moving up to Camp Numkeg and that whole process. And, with the Park and Rec Department, myself, we sat down with the immediate abutters. There's 6 or 7 or 8 homes that are right there, eye shot of Camp Numkeg, and they kind of laid out their hypothetical vision of what they saw. And it was, try to minimize the impacts to the direct neighbors, provide some parking off-street, move the village down closer to the water on the lower section, and that's some of the, once again, I hate to say it, the pandemic has kind of slowed that process down, but we did meet out there, it's probably like maybe 3 or 4 months ago, just with the direct abutters, and that was the first attempt to try to show them this is what the Park and Rec Department's thinking. The Park and Rec's going to, carry the ball on that one. So, I mean, we've dealt with the property at 57 Memorial Drive. The property, we talked, when you sent me the questions 2 years ago when I ran, the property that's up
behind Cannon Hills and
behind
Victory
Cannon
Road,
Hills, behind the utility access where the power lines go
between
through.
Victory Road.
Yeah,
and
behind Victory Road and Larkin. There was some property up there, city-owned property, and through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the city identified. They went out and identified all public lands, available public lands for the potential of housing, and they looked at that area because back in the day, all those parcels up there were all house lots that were given to returning veterans for short money. I want to say $1 or $5 or $10, whatever it was, and when they came back from World War II in order to build housing. Obviously, back in the day, those lots weren't taken up because, I mean, if you've walked through there, it's all a lot of ledge and stuff. And but through the process, I mean, they hired the surveyors, much like they hired the surveyors around the high school, some open area around the high school. Right. They looked at. But when they looked at the property up behind Victory and Larkin, what they determined was, the city determined was that there was someone had put made it parkland. And dedicated parkland is an act of state legislature.
Changes everything.
It's a game changer. And the whole process up there was to try to access underutilized public lands. Now, if someone back in the day had given that a park designation, which we didn't know about until we did our due diligence, we're doing the surveys and, trying to figure out what the boundaries are. And that was a game changer. I mean, most people look at me and they say, well,
can't do it.
You can't do it. And unless you're going to go to, you need and I know you've been explaining this before, but you go through that process, you need a unanimous vote of the Park and Rec Commission, 2/3 of the City Council, signed by the mayor, goes to the state legislature. You need your state senator to put it through the Senate, and you need your representative to put it through the House, and then you still have to replace the parkland with other property.
That could be a problem.
It could be a problem.
That could be a problem.
So the three sections you want to look at, the ward, obviously, back when you wore one of your other hats, parking's always an issue. The point is
never-ending issue.
It's a never-ending issue. The point's very, very dense with regards to parking. Limited spots on the street. Same thing on Derby Street. We give out or sell more than 350 times the amount of spaces we do when we give out parking passes and guest passes. And in the Willows neighborhood, it's from the events. During the pandemic, there were no events. Now you're seeing a few more. You're seeing a few more events. So you try to you want to keep the people who are enjoying a public park. It's right there. We encourage anybody to enjoy the public park. But at the same time, we want to be respectful of the neighborhood and how we gauge that. So it's a lot of juggling, a lot of balancing. So
you get to three distinct neighborhoods. But let's move on now, and we're going to fold the question about what are your priorities? What do you want to see on those 40 acres at the power plant? Let's fold that right into what would you like to see at Shetland? What's your vision? What do you think would be the right thing? Just cover it all in one big spiel. It's two huge commercial properties.
It's two huge commercial properties.
And they bookend your ward.
When you look at the footprint site, when I first started. When we first started talking about footprint in earnest, I used to attend, when I first was going to run for office, back then when we were doing the harbor plan, and I used to I'm like, okay, this is going to be a big issue for Ward 1. Ward 1 borders the water the whole way. I think Ward 1 has one registered voter on Baker's Island. I think somebody who still, I don't know if they still are, back in the day used to be,
yeah.
I'll have to go home and look at the nosy book to see if they're still out there.
I'd like to know.
Yeah, so, but back in the day when the power plant first announced that they were going to close, that was when Representative Tierney's office had given us I want to say it was $25,000 to do a study to see what would go there potentially if they ever did close. It was a hypothetical, and then all of a sudden we announced the first meeting, and a week before the first meeting they announced they're closing, and it went from hypothetical to what could really go here?
Yeah, I don't think it was ever actually hypothetical. It was presented as hypothetical.
It was presented as hypothetical.
Yeah.
It was a whole bunch of okay, and so, and then Scott and his partner Peter came in, and they repurposed the power plant site, which is a chore in itself. And but now it's okay, there's 40 acres left. What are you going to do with it? And if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you that Scott and Peter were going to try to ask to have the DPA, the Deep Port Area designation, amended and shrunk down because it was always just the boundary. It was the fence line basically of the power plant. I would have told you a year ago that they were going to ask to have that amended and then try to propose some sort of housing on the site. As early as probably almost 6 months ago, they first floated they came to, as a Ward 1 councilor, I'm a member of the Port Authority. And I also sit as a de facto member on the Harbor Plant Committee. Because it's obviously a big issue. And so we had a bunch of people come in talking to us about what potentially could go at the power plant, from wind people to, we ran the gamut. We had everyone in, and we were trying to evaluate what could potentially happen. In the last 6 months, I've seen the pivot, as I call it. The owners of the plant who own the site, basically, they heard what people were saying. The people did not want, we did surveys, they spoke to people, and they heard that no one wanted to amend the DPA. And they realized that was also going to come from the state. Because in order to amend the DPA, because that's a state distinction, and there's only X amount of harbors that have a deep channel coming into them, that they weren't going to be, they were not going to get what they wanted. And so they pivoted. And with the change in administration down in Washington, D.C., there's been a big push for renewable energy, specifically wind. So They have put out requisitions for interest. They had, I think, 6 companies. They're keeping it tight to the vest. We just had a meeting the other night. They're keeping it pretty tight who the 6 were, but they've narrowed it down to 2. Potentially looking to develop the site it looks like, just because of the way things are being made up with the amount of money that's going to be put into the wind industry. The next big section is like up in the harbors of Maine, up towards Maine. Salem is uniquely situated that if it was going to be a marshalling yard or a storage yard for extra blades, turbines, they've talked about these new floating platforms. I mean, for me, it's like a big learning curve. I mean, it's new floating platforms that somebody up in Maine's going to build the floating platform, but you got to float it down, then you got to erect the turbine on the platform and then float it out. So maybe their assembly there. So
there's no base on the ocean floor?
No base on it floats. So they're trying to figure. People have talked, even in our most recent last meeting, maybe to do an R&D facility down there, research and development, in order to. It's going to be. The big thought is it's going to be something that's going to enhance or work with the wind industry. That's going to be down there because there's been a big push for renewables out of Washington D.C. The money's there. The mayor meets every other week with. Bunch of the secretaries at the state level and trying to have those conversations as to where Salem potentially could fit in. At the same time, is also being respectful of the fact that, footprint power. They have the Peter and Scott who own the remaining 40 acres. It's Footprint Land LLC or something.
Yep.
It's not the power because they're 2 separate entities now.
2 separate entities, correct.
So it's their land holding company, whatever the formal name of it is. We're trying to work with them to make sure that listen, it's their property, but we also want to make sure it fits for Salem and for the neighborhood right there. I mean, so that's what we're going to try to strive for. You open up with the Shetland. Shetland's a tougher one because Shetland, you have a lot of established businesses in there, and you don't want to upset the apple cart down there. But at the same time, you also want to be what's going to enhance the neighborhood. I mean, obviously, the numbers they were talking originally, 1,500 units, is that's a lot to swallow. But I mean, if they can come up with a scaled down plan, I'd be willing to listen. I'm not gonna. I mean, without seeing something, I wouldn't commit to you what my vision is down there. I know that they've been to a bunch of neighborhood meetings. And I know some of the neighbors have really spoken. I mean, the neighbors down there, they'd love to see a supermarket, walkable, with a local flair to it,
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's some of the stuff they're talking about and how that works into potentially, how they repurpose, maybe they repurpose a building or 2 into some sort of, whatever it could be. But, they're willing to listen. And as a council, that's my job. You want to be willing to listen. You want to find out what the ask is. I'm a property owner. I own my property. If I want to do something to my property, and by zoning, I'm on an undersized, non-conforming lot. But if I want to do something to my property, I have the ability to ask. It may get shot down, but that's just the way it is. I mean, Shetland is a big piece of property, and they have the right to ask. It doesn't mean we have to change everything to make whatever they're asking for happen, but they have the right to ask, and they have the right to try to build consensus. And if they can build consensus and it seems to be a fit, then that's when you want to work with them and try to do that. And that's, as a council, that's your job. Is you try to look at the small scale and the big scale. And obviously when you look at the footprint power plant location, you look at Shetland, those are big scale. Those are
regional. They affect.
Oh yeah, I mean, it just doesn't affect the people who live in Ward 1. That's a bigger scale development. It's going to affect the city as a whole. So you have to watch that. I mean, I've had people come to me and say, well, Salem is, we're developing that, we're doing too much. And I say, okay, I looked right at him. I says, you tell me. I've been sitting on the city council 14 years. You name, and I'll put it to you. You name the one oversized development that's happened in the last 14 years in Ward 1.
In Ward 1?
Ward 1.
Oversized?
Oversized.
There have been no oversized developments in
There's only one.
Well, there's footprint.
Well, but and these aren't even permitted. You look at footprint. Footprint came up with a conceptual plan if they were going to ask for the DPA to be amended.
Are you talking about St. Joe's?
That's the only one.
Well, see,
and then when you look at that one, 100% affordability.
Yep. I always exempt that project from anything else in the city because it's still the property of the Archdiocese. I'm explaining that to people all the time.
Still, the first time I was ever sued, Robert K. McCarthy
remember
et
that.
al.
Yep.
Because if you remember back in the day, when they moved the church up to that location, when they built it, it was actually, after the fire, it was down the hill a little bit.
Yeah.
And it moved up to the top of the hill. The underlying zoning of that property was, I want to say it was R2.
Yeah.
And we extended the B5 district up to encompass, the B5 ended right on the other side of Harbor Street. We extended it up the block to up to Dow to include the property to allow the development to occur. And that was the first time as a city councilor I'd been sued, Robert K. McCarthy et al., because I was the Ward 1 council, so my name's listed first on the page.
Well, you avoided jail time, so that's good.
I did.
All right.
But that was, but you look at it now, I mean, the Pabbage's development team has got the rectory and the school.
Yep.
Rectory is a full historic renovation. The school, they're doing a nice job back there. And but when it's all said and done, when you combine all the buildings together, I want to say it's going to be somewhere around 70% totally affordable. And so when people look at me, I'm like, well, that's what we've been doing. I mean, we have the pockets, and some people don't like the conversions, and I get that. I mean, I know someone's floating around the idea of a condo conversion ordinance. We'll see how that one goes. I don't know.
It's always something.
It's always something. Never a dull moment.
Well, Bob, it's not been dull at all for the last 35 minutes.
Has it been 35 minutes?
It has.
Wow.
Time goes very quickly.
And how have you been doing?
I got no complaints.
There you go.
I'm still striding the earth like a titan.
I see you out there.
I walk everywhere still.
I know you do. Every once in a while I stop. When I see you, every once in a while I know when your knee's acted up. I can see you lumbering a little bit. I stop and say you need a ride. You're always saying, no, I'm good.
It varies from day to day is what the struggle is.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming in.
Hey.
Best of luck on the campaign trail.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You get through the primary, we'll have you in again.
And I can just say to all the voters of Ward 1, I mean, 3 candidates on the ballot. I've been doing it for the last 14 years. And if you moved to Salem because you like the direction of Salem, or if you lived in Salem and like the direction we're going, I've been part of that team for the last 14 years, and I would ask humbly for your vote to keep doing what I'm doing.
Thanks very much, Councillor. This is Bill Legault from Salem Digest with Councillor McCarthy from Ward 1. We're going to sign off again. Don't forget to vote on the 14th of September in the Salem preliminary. Got it again. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later. Thank you.